What if I told you there's a chapter in the Bible that's so powerful, so controversial, it's been at the center of heated debates for centuries? A chapter that some even consider a smoking gun when it comes to understanding the identity of the Messiah. Sounds intriguing, right? Well, buckle up, because we're diving into Isaiah 53, a chapter that's been called the Bible's forbidden chapter. But why is it forbidden? Why does it stir so much debate among scholars, rabbis, and theologians? Stick with me, because by the end you'll see why this ancient prophecy is nothing short of spine-chilling. Before we get into it, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let's jump in. Let me paint a picture for you. In Jewish synagogues, there's a tradition called the Haftarah. It's a public reading of selected passages from the prophets, and it's a practice that goes way back in Jewish history. But here's the twist. The Haftarah readings follow a very specific order that aligns with the Torah readings for that week. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? But when it comes to the book of Isaiah, something strange happens. The readings skip over one entire chapter, Isaiah 53. Now think about that for a second. Why would they skip over one of the most profound poetic chapters in all of Scripture? Why does this chapter seem to be deliberately avoided? It can't just be an oversight. Something about Isaiah 53 makes it different. But what exactly? Let's dig deeper. Isaiah 53 is extraordinary. It's not just an ordinary chapter, it practically screams for attention. The chapter speaks of a figure, a suffering servant, who bears the weight of immense pain, rejection, and even death. Not for his own sins, but for the sins of others. This is what Isaiah 53 verse 3 says. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. If that doesn't send a chill down your spine, I don't know what will. And that's just the beginning. Let me give you a taste of verse 5. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. That's powerful stuff. Pierced, crushed, punished for the sins of others? Sounds eerily familiar, doesn't it? For Christians, Isaiah 53 is one of the clearest, most vivid prophecies of Jesus Christ in the entire Old Testament. It's often referred to as the Gospel according to Isaiah because it so perfectly mirrors the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Take verse 7, for example. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Think about Jesus standing trial before Pontius Pilate, offering no defense, staying silent before his accusers. Christians see this as a direct fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy. But the connections don't stop there. Look at verse 9. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. This directly aligns with the gospel accounts of Jesus being crucified between two criminals, the wicked, and buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man. This chapter was used by early Christians as proof that Jesus was indeed the Messiah, the one who suffered for the sins of the world. But here's the thing, Jewish interpretations of Isaiah 53 are quite different. For centuries, Jewish scholars have looked at this chapter through a completely different lens. Instead of seeing the suffering servant as an individual, many Jewish scholars believe it refers to the nation of Israel. They point to verse 4. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. They see this as a metaphor for the collective suffering of the Jewish people, persecution, exile, and oppression at the hands of other nations. Prominent Jewish scholars like Rashi have championed this view, interpreting Isaiah 53 as describing Israel's suffering in exile, misunderstood and mistreated by the world. Some even suggest that this suffering will one day lead to Israel's redemption, a future restoration when God vindicates Israel. So, is the suffering servant an individual? Is it the Messiah? Or is it Israel as a nation? The debate is far from settled, and that's exactly what makes Isaiah 53 so fascinating. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about history. One of the most remarkable discoveries of the 20th century was the Dead Sea Scrolls. These ancient manuscripts, discovered in the Qumran caves near the Dead Sea, included a complete copy of the book of Isaiah, dating back to at least 100 BCE. And guess what? Isaiah 53 was right there, intact, word for word. This discovery proves that Isaiah 53 wasn't some later addition or a Christian fabrication. It's been part of this biblical text for over 2 millennia, but that's not all. The Dead Sea Scrolls also included writings that suggest the community at Qumran, possibly the Essenes, was deeply interested in messianic prophecies. Could it be that they saw something extraordinary in Isaiah 53 too? It's a fascinating thought, and it adds even more intrigue to this already mysterious chapter. Let's dive deeper into the controversies surrounding Isaiah 53. One of the biggest issues that comes up is the difference in how Jewish scholars and Christian theologians view this chapter. For Christians, Isaiah 53 isn't just any prophecy, it's the prophecy. It's like the most vivid, almost cinematic glimpse of the Messiah before he even arrived. Christians see every line as a direct foreshadowing of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. For instance, when you look at verse 5, it talks about how the servant was pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities. Christians immediately connect that to the crucifixion of Jesus, pierced with nails, crushed under the weight of the world's sins. That connection feels like a bombshell moment for them, especially when they look at verses that talk about how he was despised and rejected, which mirrors how Jesus was treated during his trial. But here's where it gets tricky. Jewish interpretations have a very different spin. Jewish tradition teaches that the Messiah is supposed to be a victorious king, a strong leader who will bring peace and restore Israel. The idea of the Messiah suffering and dying for sins doesn't quite fit with that image, and that's the tension. Some Jewish scholars believe that Isaiah 53 speaks metaphorically about Israel itself, not an individual. The nation of Israel, throughout history, has endured so much suffering, exile, oppression, and violence, and for them, the suffering servant is Israel, not a person like Jesus. This interpretation has deep historical roots. Jewish scholars like Rashi have written extensively about how Isaiah 53 describes Israel's collective suffering and how it endures hardship for the sake of humanity. Some even suggest that the servant could be a figure who represents the Jewish people's role in the world as a light to the nations. This is a point that's important to remember. Context matters. In the Jewish tradition, it's not just about the past, it's about the future redemption that will come for Israel. They believe that one day Israel's suffering will be vindicated by God, fulfilling a prophecy of peace and restoration. Christian apologists argue that Isaiah 53 is key to understanding the Messiah's mission to redeem humanity through suffering before establishing his eternal kingdom. But Jewish counter-arguments emphasize that the text never explicitly names Jesus and that the language can be understood metaphorically. For instance, the term pierced in verse 5, "He was pierced for our transgressions," has been debated extensively. Some Jewish scholars suggest the Hebrew word could also mean wounded or defiled, making it less specific to crucifixion. This debate has led to some heated exchanges, especially when it comes to evangelism. Christians see Isaiah 53 as a tool to share the gospel, while many Jews view it as a text that's been misinterpreted and even weaponized. But here's the big question. Why has Isaiah 53 been avoided in some Jewish liturgical readings? Could it be that its haunting parallels to the life of Jesus are just too uncomfortable to confront? Or is it simply a case of differing traditions and priorities? The truth might lie somewhere in between. For Christians, Isaiah 53 is a profound reminder of God's love and the sacrifice of Jesus. It's a declaration that even in suffering, there is redemption. In today's world, where debates about faith and identity are as intense as ever, Isaiah 53 continues to challenge us to think deeply, to ask tough questions, and to wrestle with our beliefs. So, where do we go from here? Whether you see Isaiah 53 as a prophecy about Jesus, a metaphor for Israel, or something else entirely, one thing is clear: it demands exploration. Don't just take my word for it. Pick up a Bible, open to Isaiah 53, and read it for yourself. Compare it to other prophetic texts like Psalm 22, Zechariah 12:10, or even the Gospel accounts. Ask yourself, what do these words mean to you? Could they point to something greater than we've imagined? If this video has sparked your curiosity, drop a comment below with your thoughts, questions, or interpretations. I'd love to hear what you think. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating biblical topics. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.